Very good evening, students. Today I want to explain you the human anatomy. So let's begin. So human body has the two sides. This is the dorsal side. You can see the dorsal line, and this is the ventral side. Where the stomach is lies, we call it as ventral side. So all the genitalia face towards the ventral side, and even mouth. Okay. The anterior opening mouth which sides we call it as the ventral side, and opposite to the ventral side we call it as dorsal side. Okay, and this is the face, and this is the cross section of the head. So you can see all the structures in the head. So this is the cranium bone which covers the brain. Okay, and you can see all the meninges which is protecting the brain, the dura mater, arachnoid matter, and the pia mater. And this is the maximum part of the brain. We call it as cerebrum, and this is the cerebellum. You can see the orbitary, and you can see this corpus callosum, which connects the both the cerebral hemispheres. And you can see the thalamus over here, and you can see the pons varoli and medulla oblongata, and that continues to the spinal cord. You can see this vertebral columns. These are cervical vertebral columns, the vertebrae in the neck region. You can see the two hollow spaces, cavities in the head. This is the sphenoidal sinus, this is the frontal sinus, and this is the nose. This is the nasal chamber, and which goes to the pharynx, and this is the mouth. You can see the upper lip and lower lip. There is a small space between the teeth and the lips. We call it as vestibule, and that enters into the buccal cavity. And buccal cavity roof is made by this palate bone, and posteriorly cartilage, and the floor is made by the tongue, and there are two cheeks, and that leads to the oropharynx. And this place we call it as the nasopharynx. This is the oropharynx, and here is a laryngopharynx. This funnel shaped space we call it as pharynx, and this white part is a trachea. Okay, that covering is epiglottis, and this small opening is called as food pipe. It's generally closes when we swallow something, it expands and enters into the stomach. Okay, uh, these are the, can see the external features of the face. And then moving on to the internal structures, this is a very animated internal organs you can see. But when we dissect or when we do postmortem of the cadaver or the cadaver, we don't look this much neat. But this is an animated picture. You can see the lungs, heart, and the liver, the small intestine, and the fat uh, on the entire abdomen. You can see the stomach, and this is the large intestine. Yes, you can see much better this. These are the lungs. You can see the liver part. This is a cut section of the large intestine. Then this is the cell structure. So we know that in all the living organisms are basically they made by cells. They are the structural and functional units of the life. No cell has this cell membrane and the cytoplasm and the nucleus. In the cytoplasm there are many cell organelles. You can see the mitochondria. These are mitochondria, have many foldings inside mitochondrial cristae, and you can see the lysozymes here, and you can see these are the vacuoles. You can see the small smooth endoplasmic reticulum, and this is a rough endoplasmic reticulum, has many ribosomes. You can see the ribosomes over here in the cytoplasm also, and they attach to the rough endoplasmic reticulum also. And you can see the centrioles here, this, and you can see the microfilaments, and these are the microtubules. here also microtubules. And we know that nucleus has a genetic material. It is a double helical structure of DNA, and this DNA has a phosphate sugar bonds and the nitrogenous bases like guanine, cytosine, adenine and thymine. Okay, you can see we always say ATGC of the nitrogenous base, and this is the double helical structure of the DNA. Okay, and moving on to the skeletal system. Okay, and we have two types of bones. One is an axial bones, you can see the central axis, and which are connected to this axis we call it as axial bones. Skull and the vertebral columnae and rib bones, they connect to the central axis, and these are the bones in the appendages, we call it as appendicular bones. And these appendicular bones are connected to the axial bones with a griddles. So these are the, at the shoulder level we call it as the pectoral griddles, and these are the pelvic griddles. Okay, now let us see the skull. There are two cochleas. These are the eye sockets, we call it as bony orbits, where eye fits here. And this is the concha for the nose. You can see the septum also here, which divides into two nostrils, and there is a cochlea here, there is a concha here. Okay, these are the teeth. And if you see on the ventral side, you can see the two carotid canals. They are very important because the two knuckles of the vertebrae will fit into this. The first vertebrae knuckles will fit into this. So that's why the human skull we call it as dicondylic. Okay, and this the opening, we call it as foramen magnum, from where the brainstem comes out and continues as a spinal cord. So you can see this is the skull. So here the first vertebrae, that is atlas, will fit into the two carotid canals. Okay, and you can see these are the neck region vertebrae, we call it as cervical vertebrae, they are 7 in number. Then the thoracic vertebrae are 12, and the lumbar vertebrae are 5. Then there is a sacrum that is fused in case of humans, and the one coxal. Okay, this is the spinal cord, this is the skull, and this is the ventral view, the lateral view of the vertebrae. It is in S shape. You can see here, uh, here this is the front view, and this is the back view, this is the side view. It is in S shape. You can also examine the different vertebrae shapes. So this is the atlas axis bone, the second vertebrae, and this is the cervical vertebrae, and this is the thoracic vertebrae and lumbar vertebrae. What you can observe, the centrum, which is the middle space, is gradually decreasing when coming to the spinal cord. Okay, you can see the cross section of the entire vertebral column with the spinal cord. You can see this portion is the spinal cord. You can see the white matter and inner the gray matter, and this is the body of the vertebrae and the two arteries which supplying the nourishment to the vertebral bones. Yeah, then move on to the bones. So this is the long bone. We have the femur in the thigh bone. So this edges we call it as the epiphysis. This is also epiphysis. The central part we call it as diaphysis. And diaphysis have a hollow structure in middle. And this we call it as bone marrow cavity, which is filled by the bone marrow. But here in the epiphysis there is small pores are there, and they fills with red bone marrow. So this is the site for RBC production. Okay, you can see this epiphysis region of the long bone. This part we can also call them as spongy bones. Okay, and the bones they connect with ligaments. You can see the ligaments, connective tissues. And these are the muscles, skeletal muscles all over the body. So we have this muscles. They're very important for the movements, locomotion, everything. These are the bones, sorry, muscles in the head and neck. You can see the various muscles in the face. Okay, so there are muscles which are responsible. So something you are concentrating, this frontalis muscle will stretch. By the contraction of this frontalis muscles you can concentrate. And for example, whenever you are too much thinking or too much concentrating, or you are focusing on microscope, okay, like this, okay, then there is a caragutor muscles will stretch. Okay, this part. So when you are kissing someone, there is a muscles over here, orbicularis muscles will stretch. And when you are smiling or when you are laughing, there is a zygomaticus muscles. We call it as zygomaticus majora. They will stretch. And when you are doing like this, ooh, and there is a depressor angulis, no, depressor angulis are present. So beside the cheeks, they will stretch. So there are different muscles are performing for your facial expressions. So when you laugh, the maximum all the 6 types of muscles will undergo stretch. So it's better to laugh. So these are the bones in hand. So these are phalanx, we call it as the smallest bones, small bones. Okay, and you can see there are 30 bones in the hand. And this is an external anatomy. You can see the fingers, and you can also see the nails. And these are the bones in the feet. And the skin, the anatomy of skin: epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis. You can see this is the sweat gland, and this is the sebaceous gland which produce oil on the skin, and this is the hair follicle. Okay, this is the brain. So maximum part what we visible is the cerebrum. And cerebrum is divides into two equal halves. We call it as cerebral hemispheres. You can see the gray matter outside and white matter inside. So this is the cross section of the brain, no? So this is the cerebrum, and this part over is the cerebellum. And you can see there are some ridges and furrows. And this furrows what we call as the sulci, and these ridges are called as the gyres. Okay, now this is the corpus callosum which connects two hemispheres. And you can see this part over here, this is the thalamus, and below this there is a hypothalamus, then that lead to the pituitary gland. And this part is the mesencephalon, the midbrain part, which has the optic loops and the cerebral peduncles. This part over here, and this is the pons varoli, and this is the medulla oblongata. So this is what we call as the brain stem, and that continues into the spinal cord, which comes out through the foramen magnum of the skull. So skull covers the entire brain. So the cerebrum we can divide into the 4 lobes by the fissures. And this part over here, this and red one, this blue one, all together we call it as the frontal lobe. And this is the parietal lobe. You can see the yellow one. And this part is the occipital lobe, and this is the temporal lobe. So there are 4 lobes are in the cerebrum, and these lobes are very specific for certain functions. You can see this occipital lobe involves in the visual recognition, and this part over here on the parietal, in the middle of parieto frontal lobe, this pink color part is responsible for sensation. and the entire frontal lobe is responsible for the skill, movements, behavior and emotion, speech, everything. We know that emotion is basically carried by the amygdala in the limbic system. It is also present in the cerebrum part, and this part is cerebellum is responsible for balancing and muscle contraction. And so these are the nerves. We know that from brain there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves will start, and from spinal cord there are 31 pairs of the spinal nerves will start. This comes under periphery nervous system. You can see the neuron structure and the big cell body, and this is an axon. It has the myelin sheaths. There are some empty spaces. We call it as nodes of Ranvier. You can see there are different types of neurons here. The multipolar neuron is a typical one. This is a unipolar neuron, and this is the bipolar. You can see the two axons, and these are the nerve endings. These are free nerve endings. You can see the various nerve endings here, and this is a synaptic end. It has the vesicles here, and these vesicles are having this neurotransmitters. So this is an eye structure. You can see this. Our entire eyeball has filled with the fluids. The major portion is the vitreous chamber filled with the vitreous humor, and you can see the anterior part is a cornea. Okay, this part is covered by the conjunctiva, and the entire white portion is called as the sclera. Okay, I have one more model also. You can see this entire white part. This entire white part is sclera. Okay, now this part, this is the cornea, and this colored structure, what we can see this colored part is an iris, and the central opening is pupil. So there is a space between the lens and this iris, and this space is called as anterior chamber, and this is the posterior chamber, and the posterior chamber is filled with vitreous humor, and the anterior chamber is filled with the aqueous humor, and this is a lens, and lens are supported by the ciliary muscles, and here the ciliary bodies will be there, and they produce aqueous humor here, and light enters through the cornea and it goes through the pupil and it falls on the lens, and in lens it light refracts and it falls on the retina, and this is the optic nerve that goes and joins at the brain. So you can see the muscles which are attached to the eyeballs. Okay, there are different muscles, the superior oblique and the inferior oblique responsible for the up and down movement of eyeball. Okay, so these muscles are called the lateral rectus, or for moving the side angles, and there are the medial rectus is responsible for the rotating of the eyes. Okay, and this is the ear. So this is an external ear, what we can see outside. This is the pinna, and pinna leads to the concha, and that leads to the external auditory meatus, and this part is called as outer ear. Then this part which connects to the pharynx, this is the eustachian tube, and it has bones, three types of bones, and that connects to the inner ear, and in inner side we can find these bones. There are three kinds of bones. These are malleus, this is incus, this is stapes. Okay, and stapes is the smallest bone in our body, and the muscle which attaches to the stapes is also called as the smallest muscle in our body. Okay, you can see this this part over here, and it is represented here. You can see three semicircular canals. One, two, three. These three semicircular canals are filled with the fluid. They are very important for the balancing of our body. And this coin structure is a cochlea, and the cochlea is responsible for the hearing sense. Okay. Now this is the nose, mouth, and throat. You can see this tongue. There are papillae, and this is made by the skeletal muscle, but it is not at all attached to the any bone. You can see the inverted V-shaped papillae. We call it as the circumvallate papillae. It is because they are circular in shape and they are valid. Circumvallate papillae, they have the taste buds, and these are all called the fungiform papillae, and the scattered fully formed papillae are there. So there are particular areas for the sense of gustato, for tasting, and this part over here, inverted V shape around this circumvallate, no, this part is responsible for the bitterness, and this part is the sourness, this part is the saltiness, this part is the sweetness. Something you keep here, you don't feel any taste. Okay. So when you touch something sweety, and know that this part, tip of the tongue, is responsible for identification of the taste. So these are the jawbone. You can see the teeth. This is the tongue. Okay, these are the submandibular glands. They secrete saliva, and it goes like this. So you can see here, very nice picture. This is the nose, and this is the palate bone. So this is only half part, and the remaining is the cartilage. This is the hard palate, this is the soft palate. You can see the back end, this is the uvula. So something when you swallow, and this uvula blocks this nasal chamber, so it ensures that no food doesn't enter into the nasal chamber also. This is the tongue, and this entire this shape, funnel shape space, we call it as pharynx, and air comes like this and enters like this into the trachea, and the food goes like this. Okay, this space, narrow space, we call it as the tube like structure, we call it as esophagus. And this is the teeth. You can see all the different types of the teeth, and you can see the incisors, 1 2 3 4, 4 in the upper jaw, 4 in the lower jaw, total 8. Then the canines. The canines are the characteristic features of the carnivores. So 1 2 1 2, so total 4. And the premolar, 1 2 3 4, 4 in upper, 4 in lower, and molars are 3 plus 3 6, and below 6. So this is the premolars, and the last one, which we call it as the wisdom teeth. So they appear in the permanent teeth. So in children, in temporary teeth, we won't find this premolars and this third molar. Okay, and third molar is called as the wisdom teeth. This starts growing after 18 years, and this is the structure of teeth. You can see this, what is visible to us, this part is enamel. Okay, this enamel, and this part is called as dentine, and in between, which is made by the connective tissue, and this part is called as a pulp. So dentine and enamel is non-cellular, and they made by the calcium phosphates and the fluorides, and there is a canal which goes to the pulp, and this canal we call it as the root canal, and this opening is called as apical foramen. Okay, so now the digestive system, the food enters here, and the buccal cavity, Now, through the help of tongue, it swallows and enters into the esophagus. Then the digestion happens in the stomach and it enters to the small intestine. And you can find this liver and the pancreas, they connected to the this part, small intestine part, and this part we call it as duodenum. So the absorption will takes place here, and this is all the small intestine, very long tube, and then it leads to the large intestine. So in large intestine, water and minerals will absorb, and undigested food will throw out through rectum and anus. So you can see the endoscopic view of all these parts, and this is the esophagus. It is always closes, so when we eat something and this expands, okay, this is a stomach entrance, this place, and this we call it as cardiac sphincter. You can see this, and this is the walls of the stomach, and this is the stomach exit here, we call it as pyloric sphincter. And this is a endoscopic view of duodenum, ileum, colon and rectum. And the heart, you can see the ventricles, auricles, everything. So this is the entire circulatory system. The respiratory system, you can see this is the right side has three lobes, the upper lobe, middle lobe and the lower lobe. And this side, the left side, has two lobes, one is upper lobe and lower lobes. Okay, so you can see the trachea, bronchi divides into bronchioles. Okay, and this is alveoli and covers by the lung tissue, we call it as pleura. You can see during the inspiration the lungs and the ribs will expand. During the expiration the lungs and ribs will contract. The urinary system, this is the kidney. You can see the entire urinary bladders and everything. Now the reproductive system, this is the male reproductive system and this is a female reproductive system. This is a cross section of the hip. Okay, you can find this testes here, and it is outside the body. It is not in the abdominal part, and it is extra abdominal cavity. We call it as the scrotal cavity. And in the testis, the sperms will generate, and that conducts through here, vas differs, and you can see this structure here. This is seminal vesicule, this is the ejaculatory duct, this is the prostate gland. From here this urethra will come and it comes through the penis. You can see the cross section of the penis. You can find some muscles over here, corpus corneosum, corpus spongiosum. This is a urethra, common opening for both urine as well as the semen. And this is the glans penis. Okay, the through penis, both sperms and the urine will come out in case of males, but female it is separate. Okay, and this is the common opening. We call it as vulva. You can see this labia majora, labia minora, and the anterior opening is the urinary opening, and it is connected to the urinary bladder. And the posterior opening is the vaginal opening, and this is vagina, and this is the cervix, and this is the uterus. Okay, here there somewhere these are the ovaries, and they are coming from the fallopian tube, and they connects to this. Okay, so in ovaries the ova will release and they captured by the fallopian tube, and they enters into the uterus, and here implantation everything will take care, and the baby grows in this uterus, and once baby fully forms they come out from this vagina. So vagina is also called as the birth canal. You can see very nicely here, these are the ovaries. The ovaries will release in the coelom, and these ampulla will amplifies the place, the fertilization will takes place, and the fertilized eggs will come and establish on the walls of the uterus. By simultaneously the divisions will happen, and the fetus will grow here. Once fetus grows and they comes out with parturition, and this is a male reproductive system. Here the sperms will produce and they conducts through this vas differs and they comes through penis, and this is the structure of sperm. And this is the development of baby. You can see the how beautiful the human body. Okay, now this is the second month. Okay, you can see, and you can see the embryo of the 5 months over here. You can see all the major organs like rudimentary liver, heart, everything. The heartbeat also starts from the third week itself. And this is the fifth month embryo, and this is the second month, and this is the third month. You can see everything, all the limbs. You can see the forelimbs, hind limbs, everything. And this is the fifth month. No, you can see the everything, genitalia, everything, even the eyelashes, everything. And if seventh month, complete development happens. Even the hair on head also will start, and baby turns 180 degrees. Okay, so this is the whole anatomy of human beings. I think it is helpful for all the grades, and please subscribe the channel and share to your friends. Thank you.